Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the special meeting of Arts, Parks, and LA River. I am joined by my colleagues David Rue and Paul Koretz. We will soon be joined by our colleague Bob Blumenfield. Colleagues, we have only one item on the agenda today. Mr. Sutton-Willis, will you please read the item?
Good afternoon. Item number 1, Joint Chief Legislative Analyst, City Administrative Officer, and Department of General Services report on motion Cedillo Fuentes O'Farrell relative to the potential acquisition of the Taylor Yard G2 parcel located 2.5 miles northeast of downtown Los Angeles. The committee shall recess into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8 to confer with its real property negotiators, the Chief Legislative Analyst, in conjunction with the City Administrative Officer and Department of General Services, and the City Attorney relative to the price and terms of the purchase of real property at 2850 Kerr Street, Los Angeles, California, commonly known as Parcel G2 of Taylor Yards, by the City of Los Angeles from Union Pacific Railroad Company, a Delaware corporation. The address includes portions of APN 5442002-823, APN 5442002-824, APN 5445004-802, and APN 5445004-803. This item is also referred to Budget and Finance.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And seeing as this is a special meeting, we won't be taking general public comment, and I have two people who filled out cards for general public comment and comment on item 1. We'll hear only item 1 since that's the only item and it is a special. We have so many cards today that I'm going to request that we take 1 minute per comment. And we're going to start with Mr. B, followed by Antonia Ramirez, followed by Purvi Doshi. But the first three cards in that order. And 1 minute.
Yeah. So, what a great idea. Buying contaminated land. That is a great idea. Yes, Mr. Rue, we're buying contaminated land today. Isn't that a nice thing? Don't you love environmental cleanup responsibility and PRPs? Don't you just love it? Yes, it's only going to cost $17 million to clean up these parcels, right? Bullshit! Yes, yes. This is the bullshit agreement because we're going to restore the river so we can take a kayak and we can kayak all the way from Tujunga Footlands all the way down to the harbor, right? We have nothing better to do with this money than to engage in something this fucking crazy. So you have two options, to buy it or not to buy it. I'd stay the fuck away from this like it's cancer. No on this fucking thing. We do not want a sequel cleanup.
It's always nice to start on an up note, I think.
Oh, no.
Ms. Ramirez, you are next, followed by Purvi Doshi, which will be followed by Wendy Ramello.
Started me already. Could you start me again, please?
Okay, it's starting now.
Thank you very much. I'm in a bit of a quandary. You have here two options. And again, it says Taylor Yard, G2 for the Los Angeles River Ecosystem Restoration. And you either buy it or don't buy it. Now, what I don't understand is before you entered into an agreement with the wonderful United States Military Army Corps of Engineers who are going to help you rebuild and revitalize the LA River, did you not take into consideration this G2, the Taylor Yard G2? Because I'd like to know why it's so precious of a commodity. Are we going to use it to transport things on this land into the river or what? What is the main focus of this? And if we don't buy it, can we sell it to a buyer? Can we sell it to of course, a buyer and then sublease it if it's that expensive? Something that will be equitable for the city and the taxpayers. So I'd like to know, why didn't this come into view before you formed this agreement with the Army? I'm in a bit in a quandary.
Interesting. Thank you. And Purvi will be followed by Wendy Ramello, followed by Jill Soriel.
Thank you. I'm Purvi Doshi on behalf of River LA to support the city's acquisition of the G2 parcel. Land acquisition is a critical component to our goal of a revitalized river. And at little over $1 million per acre, the city is able to incorporate a really vital piece of land at a really great value. The purchase of the site will open the door to other funds, both public and private, in the future. Lastly, one of River LA's goals is to create contiguous experience along all 51 miles of the river that all communities can enjoy. The G2 parcel helps accomplish this goal by providing connectivity and access between two other major parcels, the 17-acre state parcel and the 25-acre Rio de Los Angeles Park. We appreciate the committee's consideration of this matter, and we urge you to please support option 1, which is the purchase of the G2 parcel.
Thank you. Ms. Ramallo, followed by Jill Suriel.
Good afternoon, honorable members of this committee, Chairperson. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm the Executive Director of the Council for Watershed Health to support this acquisition. We've supported this effort for 20 years, and we will support it for 20 more. It's a historic day, once again, to keep moving forward with this vision. The tangible benefits this acquisition will provide are ecological, economic, and social. It will help us reduce pollutant runoff. It's going to help us provide desperately needed recreational space and habitat for all of the thousands of children and families that live in the adjacent communities. But more importantly, it represents a vision that the mayor should be commended for and this committee should be commended for. We have a one water approach with our agencies now, but this represents a one people approach for our city. So I thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this.
Thank you so much. And we are joined by our colleague Bob Blumenfield. There are multiple committees being held today, and so everyone's kind of running from one to the next. It's that kind of a day. We have Jill Suriel, followed by Mia Lehrer, who will be followed by Karen Flores.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. Jill Suriel with the Nature Conservancy. Our organization is a national and international nonprofit. We have been advocating for revitalization of the Los Angeles River and the attention that can be brought to this community for the multiple benefits that it provides. In addition to recreation and water quality and green infrastructure components, the Nature Conservancy just recently completed a 2.5-mile habitat assessment study from Griffith Park to Taylor Yard. And this really represents one of the few opportunities where you can reconnect to the historic floodplain and have the opportunity for, we found over 300 species, plant and animals. So we really would love to see this crown jewel acquired and brought into the mix for future revitalization purposes. And I'm just going to leave with you a summary of our study, and there's some more in the back in case anybody's interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing the study as well. There's Mia Lehrer, followed by Karen Flores, followed by Manissa Christensen.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. An exciting day, my goodness. It's been a few years since we've sort of had this parcel in consideration, and I'm obviously in support of the acquisition. We need a revitalized river corridor, a corridor that will bring together the community ecologically, economically, and socially. Across the country, these kinds of people, understand the value, inherent value of these kinds of opportunities and industrialized sites that can be reimagined and recalibrated and basically integrated into our communities. We think that this is an opportunity that should not be missed. And everybody understands that these are costly ventures, but they pay back in spades. And we need to do this. So I'm so pleased that we are here and that there is a vision and leadership associated with this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Karen Flores, followed by Marissa Christensen.
Hi, my name is Karen Flores. I'm an independent river advocate. I want to compliment all the members of this committee for their various environmental stewardship in different areas, on bags and on bicycles and on Crystal Springs. And so I feel really good about this committee. I want to validate people's sticker shock on this G2 parcel. I was very sad to watch Union Pacific and Trammell Crow operate. I was really shocked at remediation costs, but that parcel's been contaminated for possibly 5 generations if you sit and look at the years. Maybe that's why it's valid to spend this money. I'm here for the environment, I'm here for the wildlife, I'm here for ecology, for connectivity, and I recommend you purchase this parcel before it gets out of our hands. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Marissa Christensen, followed by Paolo Perron, and who will be followed by the esteemed Ed Reyes.
Hi, I'm Marissa Christensen. I'm the Senior Policy Director for Friends of the Los Angeles River, and I'm here today to offer our enthusiastic and unwavering support in the purchase of the G2 parcel for the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project. FOLAR has long believed in the vision for this crown jewel in river restoration. To that end, we undertook one of our largest singular fundraising endeavors to raise $1 million to close the funding to close gap funding that threatened the completion of the Arbor study. And we did so because we believed in it as a significant precedent-setting step in river restoration and trusted the city as stewards of the plan to make it a reality. So often plans like these languish before implementation, so to be sitting here less than 3 months after plan adoption as you consider taking action is nothing less than stunning. With all the plans, ideas, and visions happening around the river today, it's crucial that the city exemplify river leadership by taking this benchmark plan and making it a reality. So thank you for your swift action, and I hope your leadership here today will spur momentum for other opportunities on the river.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Paolo Peroni, and I'm here on behalf of the Trust for Public Land and excited to see this acquisition in front of the committee again, and we wholeheartedly urge the city to go forward with the purchase of the G2 parcel to build on the decades of projects that we've completed along the LA River and the dozens of acres that we've protected, recognizing that the G2 parcel is really the crown jewel of the LA River acquisition program. And again, we just want to thank the committee members and offer any support we can for this outstanding purchase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peroni. Now, our last 2 speakers are going to be Ed Reyes and Louis Mcadams. Mr. Mcadams, please make your way forward, and Mr. Reyes, if you would like to start. And before you give your comment, I just want to pay tribute to you, because I think one of the reasons we're all sitting here is because you drove this train, metaphorically, for all those years. And here we are, it's before committee. We're taking a look at going into escrow, and it's come to this. And I couldn't be more proud to have you here as my mentor on the City Council, chairing this committee before I did. So it's a great honor to have you here, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. And I'm very humbled to be here. I sit here representing thousands and thousands of individuals who over the years have come to this very room and sat here throughout all those years to talk about how we create relief for our great city. Folks like, well, I won't start naming names because then I'll leave somebody out. Mm-hmm. But the essence of my statement here is that this is not a district issue. This is not a neighborhood issue. This is a regional issue. If we're ever going to be in a place where we can systematically look at how we address the issues of the drought, how we contain water, how do we store it, how do we filter it, where can we start looking for that strategy that speaks to relief for our grandkids, this is that piece of land. Nowhere else will you find one piece of land that has one owner in such a important location from a regional watershed point of view. If you look at all the hydrology reports, if you look at the Army Corps reports, if you look at the nexus between the light rail lines, the transference of old zones to modern zones with all the different land use patterns that are evolving through the Cornfield Rail specific plan, when you look at the trends that speak to how we treat our infrastructure and transportation, this river corridor plays a significant role. But this piece of land is that pivotal point. So yes, the dollar figure is high. But the multiplier effect in the future, when we talk about these ancillary impacts in our economy, in our infrastructure, in our natural habitats, it's just hard to quantify. So yes, the council members of the valley, all along the Hollywood area, everyone north is going to be able to benefit from this because then we have an opportunity to slow the water down. It'll have an impact on how we look at the speed of the water. Down to the reaches going south, we can hold it back to again control the speed, the hydrology, the impacts of how we could actually have it structured so we can filter it out. So there's a lot of technical issues here that you're going to read about it. But for me, this is one of those moments that is very historical for this body, this council body, this mayor, to have this impact on our grandchildren. I can't express to you just how significant this is. So it has that type of impact. And I really hope that given all the negativity, the naysayers are not informed, who don't understand the regional impacts, that we take the time to inform them as we go through this process. So again, thank you so much on behalf of future generations and a whole new face for our great city. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ed. And we will distill the facts before this decision, and I think it'll be very clear on the merits, or if someone feels differently, on moving forward with opening an escrow. And we will dial down, and we have to have some of these questions answered in closed session because it's a real estate transaction. But I'm very confident that my colleagues will have a very informed set of circumstances to choose from. So thank you so much for all of your work. We're all here because of your work.
And thank you for your cooperation, your
Thank you.
support. Thank you.
Thank you. And are we ready for Mr. Mcadams? A few people have submitted cards. So, Louis, I can hear a few more people if you want to continue making your way up. Why don't we do that? Why don't you be the last person we hear from on this? Let's do it that way. So we have 3 more cards in. Let's close the comment card at this point. We've got Margot, and Margot, forgive me, I can't. Jacobs. Oh, it's easy. Joe Edmiston, and then it'll be Brian. Brian what? Oh, Brian back there. Okay, thank you. Please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Margot Jacobs. I'm a concerned resident of Los Angeles, and I am in support of the acquisition of the G2 parcel. Unfortunately, in this global climate, we are living in an age where there's no option but to remediate polluted sites. G2 will provide an immense opportunity to transform neighboring communities and expand the city's progress on the revitalization of the Los Angeles River. This vision is critical in redefining LA as a leader in resilient and environmentally sustainable practices that truly support its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Joe Edmiston, followed by Brian Bamark.
I hate this while this guy.
I know.
Okay.
He won't mind.
He doesn't want to sit.
Mr. Chairman and members, for 11 years I taught a class on the history of park planning in the United States at, when I'm at USC, they say at the other university, and when I'm at UCLA, they say the university, but it was at UCLA. And one of the most exciting things is to talk about Central Park in New York. And what is so fascinating is you go back to the historical record, you go back to the old microfiche of the articles about the horrible expense of building Central Park and of acquiring Central Park. And why the heck? Because at that point, it was a 30-minute walk. It was a 30-minute walk from the edge of town to Central Park, and it was a boondoggle. That's what they said. It was a boondoggle to make the developers of that area rich. Well, of course, Central Park, in the heart of Manhattan, is of inestimable value to us all. Brian here has the aerial that shows how critical we have the investment of the Sotomayor School, we have the investment of the Metro, we have the investment of state parks in Rio de Los Angeles State Park. We have the only real bend in the river which can be restored. On the other side, we have Marsh Park, and the bikeway. This is the heart of our city investment now. To not go ahead means at the heart of that investment, I mean, this is not just a question of do we spend the money. At the heart of that investment is then UP says, well, you're not interested. I'm selling to the highest bidder, and God knows who the highest bidder would be there. And then you're going to be faced with, well, what the heck do? We have industrial zoning. We've said that the public is not going to buy it. So what is the god-awful industrial use is going to be put there in the heart of our public investment in the Los Angeles River? That's why you should go ahead now. You're going to have the support of the state of California. You have the support of the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. We have a Proposition 1 bond of $100 million for the Los Angeles River. Not all of it's going to be spent here, but a heck of a lot of it will be. Mr. Chairman, we urge an aye vote.
Thank you so much, Joe. And Brian, did you want to? Okay. Thank you so much. And Louis, you can stand or sit.
I'll try to stand until I fall over.
Okay. All right. Well,
But I'm not going to fall over. I said, I'm not. Thank you, Bill. But I'm not going to fall over. I mean, I've been saying that for 30 years. Every time I fall over, I get back up and keep on kicking. And there's not a person in this room that hasn't got a story to tell about their own moments on the Los Angeles River and on this piece of land. And I know that this is just a moment in the turning. The river wants to wind. It doesn't want to go in straight lines. It wants to be part of the movement of our, just like our bodies in the wind and the willows. Is we pledge to ourselves, pledge to each other that we're not going to stop until we get this land, until this land becomes a gathering place for all of Los Angeles, for all the Southwest, and for all the United States. People coming to see us, visit us. A big family. This is a family bill. This is the bill that brings us all together, and we're so grateful to have had a chance to serve the river for these years. And I look around this table, and I see the people who are going to be serving the river the next 30 years, and I say, welcome aboard, y'all. Come on down.
thank you, Mr. Mcadams. Thank you so much. And that concludes our public comment. And I would now like to invite Matthias Farfan of the CLA's office, along with Jacqueline Wagner from City Administrative Officer, to provide the report on this potential agreement.
I didn't say anything about that.
We go.
Could I say one last word?
You can wrap it up with one last word.
I just want to say is October the 8th, is Saturday night, I believe,
Okay.
is the next is the full hour fandango, and we hope everyone comes down. We got the special guest that we're leaking the news. Is Moby. Moby is going to be playing for free for full hour down by the river.
Do you have flyers back there for fandango?
We got, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, committee.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you.
Matthias Farfan for the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst. Before you today, you have a joint report from CAO, CLA, GSD regarding the acquisition of Taylor Yard G2. At the beginning of the report, there's two options. Option one lays out the council actions that would be needed to proceed with the acquisition of Taylor Yard. Option two is simply to forego the purchase of Taylor Yard G2 at this time. Just to give you an overview, I'll just give you an overview of overall property description, a summary of the purchase and sale agreement that's attached to the report, and a little bit about the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project. As was stated before by some of the public comment, Taylor Yard G2, it's approximately 41.485 acres, so 41.5 acres. It's located northeast of the 5 and 110 interchange. It's adjacent to the Los Angeles River, Metrolink rail. It has some petroleum pipelines that are also running adjacent to the property. It's also adjacent to the Rio de Los Angeles State Park, and of course adjacent to Taylor G1, which is currently owned by the state. It's referred to as Bowtie. It's currently zoned for industrial use. It currently has a state-approved remedial action plan to clean it up to industrial use level. Also, the Metro has agreed to pay for the construction of a bike pedestrian bridge that would start off on the west bank of the LA River and come on to Taylor Yard G2, connecting CD13 with CD1. And it's located within Reach 6 of the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project, of which the City Council approved the EIR on that project back in June of this year. Regarding the purchase and sale agreement, it stipulates a purchase price of the property for $59.3 million, at which point, if the city were to close escrow, Union Pacific would get $59.3 million, and they would immediately be required to open up a remediation escrow account for $14.7 million of those proceeds. Those proceeds would be used to reimburse the city's remediation of the property. As mentioned before, there currently is a state-approved RAP to clean it up to industrial level. Upon acquisition, we would need to enter into a new agreement with the state, at which point the city could choose to remediate it to a standard that differs from industrial. It is a purchase, the purchase and sale agreement is to purchase the property in as-is condition, which means we would be responsible for the remediation. The timeline for the cleanup would depend on our negotiations with the state. So the only timeline we would have to adhere to would be a state-approved timeline for the remediation. As far as the timeline to acquire the property, if we were to proceed with the acquisition, the first step would be to open escrow on or prior to October 31st. Upon opening escrow, it would be a 120-day escrow period. The first 90 days would be a feasibility review period, at which point the city would perform one of the key items the city, or process the city would perform, would be an addendum to the EIR that was adopted by council back in June that's specific to Taylor Yard G2. That EIR would need to be approved by council prior to the close of escrow. During that feasibility review period, city staff would also do other due diligence on the property. For instance, we would go out and ascertain the condition of the petroleum pipeline that runs adjacent to the property, just to make sure there's no safety concerns or health concerns where that's involved, or do any, and also the funding would also be detailed by staff prior to the close of escrow. The city has an option to back out of escrow anytime during the feasibility review period and get back our $100,000 deposit. At the end of the 90-day period, we would then have 30 days after that to close escrow. During that period, the city can still back out of escrow, but we would forfeit our $100,000 deposit. That said, I mean, the layer, it's part of the layer project. If you have any questions regarding that component of it, Bureau of Engineering's here, and they're far more qualified
Okay. Thank you, Matthias. Ms. Wagner, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Matthias did a fantastic job.
Okay, thank you. Quick question. So if this deal went sideways after 90 days, we would get the $100,000 deposit back within 90 days, but after that we would lose it. Is that right?
Yes, unless it's Union Pacific that backs out, then we get the $100,000 back. But if the city backs out after the 90 days, then we forfeit the $100,000.
And I mean, that's a big if. I mean, based on your communications with Union Pacific, there's no reason to believe they would back out, because this is the deal that you've been working on essentially.
Yes.
There's nothing no reason for us to believe there would be a chance they would back out based on what you know.
That is correct.
Okay. And let me ask you this. In terms of if the city acquires G2, what future actions or requirements would be to develop a project on Taylor Yard G2? In other words, what further actions or agreements, and what are the timelines for those further actions or agreements? And maybe you could speak a little bit to the remediation requirements within that vis-a-vis the 14 million plus on the required remediation.
Well, again, the 14.7 million is our best. That's our negotiated amount between Union Pacific and the city on how much it would cost to remediate the property up to industrial use standard. Upon acquisition of the property, we would then need to sit down with the state and describe what we plan on doing on the property, and that would determine whether an amendment to the RAP is needed or whether a brand new RAP is required. Simply purchasing the if we acquire Taylor Yard G2, it would be in furtherance of the Alley River Ecosystem Restoration Project, but there still needs to be design agreements executed with the Army Corps. And at a future date, there still needs to be an agreement with the Army Corps executed on the actual project on Taylor Yard G2. And that is when then Taylor Yard G2 then would formally become part of that Alley River Ecosystem Restoration Project. If for some reason the city doesn't execute that agreement with the Army Corps at a future date, at that point then the city would need to consider what is done with Taylor Yard G2.
But it's safe to say that acquiring it now, unless we do what is beyond the industrial requirements for the remediation, we could basically land bank it?
Well, we wouldn't, it wouldn't be land banking.
But I'm just saying we could if we chose to, based on what it is we would then need to do if we pursue the so-called alternative 20 arbor improvements.
Yes. Well, the project, yes.
Okay, so yeah, because
we'd be working towards, Jackie Wagner with the CAO, we'd be working towards a viable project. We would not be, quote unquote, land banking. It's not, it's probably not, it's not something that we could do legally.
Okay, it's not something we could do legally. So we would be, if we head down the road of here's what we want to do, and that would then determine what additional level of remediation we would need to do, which would then inform the cost.
Yes.
Which would then inform us of moving forward or
and that's
picking an alternative.
Yes.
And to clarify, it would all depend on the funding source that's ultimately used to acquire the property. We currently, the adopted budget did reserve $40 million in MCLA for Taylor Yard G2. That funding would have some restrictions on it, so certain things aren't allowed if there is MCLA financing tied to it.
All right, and those are the types of questions that we need to ask in closed session, right? Because they're of a sensitive nature, from my understanding. But I have another question before we move in that direction, and that is in relation to rising land costs. If we don't open escrow by October 31st, and we decide to take a pass, what would be the consequences of that?
Well, Union Pacific could come back, and if we were interested at a future date, could order a brand new appraisal of the property. The negotiated price was negotiated over a year ago, so there is the chance that they may come back and want a new appraisal done, at which point that could come back and be more. When we did the original appraisal, and both appraisers, the cities and Union Pacific, because both two appraisals were done, both found that the best and highest use of the property was for industrial use. There's been changes that have been occurring in the area. So, if a new appraiser comes in and finds out that the best and highest use is something else that adds value to the property, there is always the risk there as well.
Okay. And lastly, and I'm going to recommend that we go into closed session after this, but do you have... could you tell a bit about what the state agency, their role, what the requirements are when we acquire this for the 14.7 remediation costs that are part of the $59 million package? And who are they? What are they requiring of us to do?
Well, right now, as I mentioned, it's the DTSC, and they're the agency that processed the remedial action plan with Union Pacific. Again, it's to remediate the property up to industrial use standard. It basically comes down to removing a certain amount of soil from the property and replacing it with clean soil to bring it up to the industrial use standard. Upon acquisition of the property, we would need to sit down with that agency to negotiate our own agreement to implement that plan, and at that point we would negotiate what the timeline is for that, or whether or not we're going to move forward to try to amend that plan.
And how soon would we be required to sit down with them upon acquisition? Would it be immediate?
It would be immediately, yes, upon acquisition.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So colleagues, if you have some real general questions, I'm happy to go there, but then we're going to need to go into closed session. Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I don't think any of my questions are closed session questions, but if I'm wrong, somebody should let me know. So first of all, sections of the Taylor Yard were acquired for public use over a decade ago, but G2 wasn't. Any idea why that wasn't included at the time, and wouldn't we have gotten a better price for it if we had done it all at the same time?
Well, Taylor Yard, the original size of Taylor Yard was, I don't know what the exact size was of the original land, but it was a very large parcel. And it's called G2 for a reason, because you have A through G, and even G was divided between G1 and G2. So I would think, I don't know what the reasoning was that it was sold off in sections. I would just say that the state does own the park that's adjacent to San Fernando Road, and then they also owned the Taylor Yard G1 parcel that's referred to as Bowtie, that's north of G2. There's also the Sotomayor Learning Center that also used to be part of G2, and there's even a residential development that's along San Fernando Road that I believe was also part of G2, and plus the Metrolink operations that are also adjacent to G2. So there are various owners that have purchased Taylor Yard.
And Barbara Romero is raising her hand. Do you have the total acreage?
Not the total acreage, but it was when the other when State Parks purchased it, it was still operational. So Union Pacific was not a willing seller for that parcel. So that was one of the reasons.
But now they are, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And do we have any idea how we're going to pay for the remediation and development, or do we not need to know that at this stage?
Well, currently in the agreement, as I mentioned, the $59.3 million does include $14.7 million that would be set aside to reimburse the city as it remediates the property. So the funds would be already identified and set aside to clean it up to industrial standard. If we do negotiate an amendment to the remediation action plan, it all depends what that involves and whether or not it'll be above the 14.7 initially or below that. So it all depends on what that turns out to be.
And I'm not sure I totally understand. If we wanted to turn this into a park, I presume we have to do more than just bring it up to industrial standard. How much more or how costly are we anticipating that to be?
Right now, in the report, we just include the cost to realize the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project. Bureau of Engineering, their estimate for that project today is $252 million. So that includes the additional remediation that's required on the property. It's a mixture of remediation and also the construction of the property.
I'm just going to interject real quick. Matthias, that is...
Yeah, and the land purchase.
That includes the land purchase, yeah. But that also includes if we move forward with the arbor vision, yes. Right? So yes. In other words, we're kind of at a juncture right now, and we're at a juncture where we put down escrow, which is the only decision we're going to make today, and then we move to acquire the property. And if we have the property, then we have a menu of options. One of the options could be to move forward with the arbor project, the so-called Alternative 20, and fulfill that vision. But that'll be a big decision for us to make, and that's not what we're deciding by acquiring the property.
Correct. That would, yes, it would be to acquire the property to further discussions on that project. But those would be future council actions would be required to actually approve the project on Taylor Yard G2.
Because if I may, because I kind of know where the questioning might go, and it's very understandable. Because the report also talked about the escalating price of Alternative 20, upwards of $1.6 billion. What I want to do is make sure that we're not confusing the two issues with the decision we're making today. It's really very, very important. I am certainly not going to ask of my colleagues to agree to more than what we agreed to 3 years ago. I'm not going to do that at all. So I want to make sure that the concern we all have with the escalating cost of Alternative 20 doesn't cloud our decision-making in acquiring this parcel, which is the linchpin to the entire sort of northeast portion of the river revitalization. kind of one decision at a time, in my view, is what we need to consider. But I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think that provides some context because the report could be perceived as kind of alarming in terms of the sticker shock issue. But I think we need to boil it down in real simple terms, and that is, before us is a decision to allocate $100,000 to go into escrow. We have 90 days to explore what that's like, where it can go sideways or it can come back and say, this is really the best deal, let's move forward. And that's another decision we'll be making. So that's, I wanted to just point that out. We're not considering at all the other part of the report.
And do we have a sense of how this fits in with development of the other parcels that we have control over? Assuming we move forward with some sort of an intelligent development plan, how does this fit in?
Oh, I would leave Bureau of Engineering to respond to that, or someone from the river team.
Good afternoon, Gary Lee Moore, City Engineer. It fits in really well. It is what we've all seen as the cornerstone piece of the ecosystem restoration study. And I think what's really key about this, and if I can just look at my notes here, there's this parcel here, I was going to say is the restoration and the objective of the entire study can only occur with the inclusion of this parcel or the LATC parcel, or known as the piggyback yard. So when we say that it's the linchpin, that's how important it is to us. So the entire feasibility study that we brought to you, it's key that it is the linchpin in making it possible to get the ecological benefits that we so much want from the ecosystem study.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to recommend that we go into closed session so we can ask the detailed questions about the transaction. Yeah. Yeah. You don't need more comment, right? No. Do they know this? Start.
If you want Bob to leave, oh yes, but I want to say it's a concern. If you I don't want to just take the vote. I want to explain my vote.
Well, I want Bob to vote, so go. Yeah. Okay. Great. 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 So David, can you state your concerns like in 30 seconds?
Okay, I'll do it real quick.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Cieli, please clarify one more time what is before us today, and I understand you have an amendment to make.
Yes. Again, before you today are two options. One option is if the committee wants to proceed with opening escrow, that would be the actions under option one. Or it would be option two if the committee wants to forgo the purchase of Taylor Yard G2. That would be the recommendation to approve would be under option two in the report. Regarding the recommendations under option one, we do have some amendments to recommendation 1 and 4, and those are technical corrections, just so they'll be more in line with what CEQA requires.
Okay. All right. Are the microphones on? Okay. All right. So colleagues, any last comments before we take the vote? Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know we have an interest of time. I just wanted to first state my full support for the LA River. You know, I just recently kayaked on Sepulveda Basin. I was part of my first job ever in life was with the LA Conservation Corps. I've witnessed firsthand its natural beauty, and I know how important how much of this is a treasure for all Angelinos. As a matter of fact, I dedicated $500,000 from my 4th District Quimby funds to support the river's Valley Greenway project to create an active transportations for pedestrians, bikers, and equestrians, and making the river more accessible again to all Angelinos. And I believe we need to create more green spaces across our city, but at the same time, the value in purchasing the G2 parcel for restoration, I have concerns with the price tag associated with it. And, you know, the city, we're already currently struggling and searching for funds to pay for repairs for our aging infrastructure and services to our homeless population. However, it's been clearly explained to me that today we are voting to open up the Escrow. Yep. Thank you. Open it to escrow, and there is still a 90-day period for us to vet out all the other concerns that we might have, and it's the beginning of the feasibility review period. But I want to be clear that we need safeguards in place, and I want to make sure that we're watching every dime to get the highest and best use for this property. So, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be voting yes.
You bet. So, my recommended action is approve option 1. And the related instructions numbered 1 through 4, as amended by the CLA just now, and we'll have the details. Would you do that?
Recommendation 1 would now read: authorize a loan of $100,000 from the reserve fund to the unappropriated balance Fund 100/58 and appropriate therefrom to the Capital Improvement Expenditure Fund 100/54 to a new account entitled Taylor Yard G2. And to open escrow for the acquisition of Taylor Yard G2 parcel, referred to as Taylor Yard G2, for 41.485 acres at a purchase price of $59,315,000, of which $14,715,000 will be used to reimburse costs of city remediation of existing soil contamination, with the close of escrow contingent on council review and approval of the addendum to the Los Angeles River Ecosystem Restoration Project Environmental Impact Report and Environmental Impact Statement, referred to in this report as CEQA Addendum under Recommendation Number 4. And then Recommendation 4 would now read: instruct the Bureau of Engineering with the assistance from appropriate city departments to develop and process an addendum to the Los Angeles River Ecosystem Restoration Project Environmental Impact Report and Environmental Impact Statement, which is now referred to as the CEQA Addendum, that addresses the acquisition of Taylor Yard G2, and to report to council within 45 days on the CEQA Addendum, with the close of escrow contingent on council review and approval of the CEQA Addendum.
And further amend instruction 5 to read: CLA and CA, with the assistance of the CAO and BOE, as needed to negotiate an agreement with Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy for identified state grant funds to offset the costs associated with Taylor Yard G2, and report on the status of the negotiations and funding within 45 days of the start of escrow, but before the end of the feasibility review period. And instruct the BOE to report to this committee within 45 days on the status of the addendum to the Los Angeles River Ecosystem Restoration Project, EIR, EIS, and the review process. Without objection, that is the order. Okay? Unanimously. Thank you. Are there any more items?
There are none on that, sir.
Thank you. And that concludes this special meeting. Thank you.